Welcome to the Transport Technology 3AI. Got it on Zoom. Yeah, it is on full screen. So I trust that you will at the end of this course learn something on transport technology, specifically relating to the modules of the chapters in this subject. And be able to pass the test and the final exam. So this course is offered as one of the subjects, one of the instructional programs for your BET program. That's the new Bachelor of Engineering Technology Civil Engineering degree. So if you want further information on other courses, then we don't need the transcript. If you want further information, yes, you can refer to the Civil Engineering Handbook, which contains the official syllabus. And with regard to study guide, yes, that's posted on Moodle, so you can refer to Moodle for the updated study guide as well as the term planner. So the syllabus, basically there's three chapters or sections. Transport planning, which is a very short section, which we'll complete today. And then transportation systems and traffic engineering. You don't really require a password now. If you are officially registered for the course, then you should have direct access to Moodle. And you would have then been loaded onto MS Team as well. With regard to the three main chapters that's reflected here, transport planning covers theory aspects. So the theory is covered in transport planning. Transportation system also covers a fair amount of theory with some calculation. And you will find that your first test then will cover transport planning and transportation system. So with regard to the first test, you will find there is a fair amount of theory, could be anything up to 60%, with the balance made up of calculations, transportation systems, calculations. The third chapter, traffic engineering, is mainly calculations, calculations. Of course, some theory. And your test 2 will cover traffic engineering only. Okay, and you all know that at the exit level, you have to satisfy Engineering Council of South Africa, that's EXA's graduate attributes, GA. Now, if you went through the study guides, you will find that not all, but many of your exit level subjects cover a particular 3A. You need to satisfy graduate attribute 4, GA4, which deals with investigation, data analysis, and so forth. So that is covered in test 2. So test 2 basically assesses your graduate attribute, GA4. Okay. What is also very important to note with regard to test 2, you must achieve a minimum of 50%. So sub-minimum rule applies. You must achieve a minimum of 50% in your GA test, which is test 2. Failing achieving 50%, unfortunately, that means you will not be granted a DP, a course mark, to write the final exam. So please take note of that. And there is more information in your study guide with regard to your graduate attribute and assessment. So your course mark then is based on 2 tests. The first test we spoke about, which covers your chapter 1 and 2, transportation planning and transportation systems. And at this stage, I also want to mention to you that it would certainly be in your best interest to write the scheduled test. We all know it's so easy to get a doctor's certificate. Any spaza shop will give you a doctor's certificate. But bear in mind If you don't write the scheduled test, which means, yes, with the doctor's certificate, you're now eligible to write the special test. That special test is set at the end of the semester and could cover any aspect of the syllabus, the whole syllabus. And from past stats, which if you want I can share with you, pass rate in the special test is in between 5 to 10%. I don't think you want to be exposed to that. By writing the scheduled test, you're only covering the first 2 chapters, and the pass rate in the scheduled test is always above 80% from past stats. So something for you to take note of. Same obviously applies to the second test. So you can see the note, the graduate attribute, GA4, which deals with investigation, experiments, data analysis, and that will be then assessed in test 2. So at the end of your program, you should have satisfied all of EXA's graduate attributes. Previously, there were 10 GAs. We have now added the 11th GA, GA11, which deals with management, engineering management. So if you go through all your subjects, you can pick up where the various GAs will be assessed. I know in your design project, a couple GAs are assessed in your design project, more than one. So that's basically in terms of the assessment. Examination. Yes, we at this stage we are looking at an exam on site exam like your test, 3-hour exam that will constitute 60%. It's a closed book exam. An annexure will be attached to the question paper, and if you go onto Moodle, you will see a copy of the annexure on Moodle. And I suggest that you look at that annexure, get familiar with that annexure, so that you know exactly which formula will be given in the test and the exam and which will not be given, which you will need to know. So therefore, get familiar with the annexure. So at this stage, yes, we are looking at an exam, but like I said, it could change depending on the pandemic situation. It could change to CA, continuous assessment, and it could even change to an online assessment. But for now, yes, your test and your examination is online, face-to-face on campus. So we then look at the first chapter then, transportation planning. So what is transportation planning? So you can see very self-explanatory, concerned with all aspects of movement. We're looking at movement of not only people, but goods as well. Your freight also falls under transportation planning. By any means, when we talk in terms of any means, what system? So whether it's by road, is it by rail, by water, by air? So that's your transportation system over any distance. Distance, yes, you could expect shorter distance maybe with road transport compared to, say, air transport, longer distance. And it has to be for some purpose, some trip purpose, some reason. So if you were going to campus, then your trip purpose will be education. If you're going to the casino, then obviously it's recreational, gambling, enjoyment. So you can see your trip purpose can change. Going to work, so trip purpose could be work. So that's in a nutshell, and you will find that there is a direct link between your transport systems and land use. When we talk in terms of land use, and if I could relate you to typical examples, consider the Gateway Complex. Can you imagine the Gateway Complex standing there with no proper transportation network to link you to the complex? So you can see the direct link and how it has an impact on the value, the economic growth. Look at all the buildings that have come about around the Gateway complex, the flats that have developed around the Gateway complex, and the value, the cost. Single bedroom flat in that vicinity costs you more than $1 million. So you can see the direct link there between the transport system and your land use. And if you look at the last bullet there, you can also see how the cost of transportation impacts. So, you know, the moment there's an increase in the price of fuel, the price of bread, the price of milk, all other food items goes up, directly linked to transport. Now, can you imagine you were a farmer in Billyburg and you needed to sell your product? You were planting cabbages in Billyburg and you needed to sell the cabbages in the marketplace, which is in Timbuktu. And if you didn't have the transport to transport your cabbages to the marketplace, what a waste. So you can see the direct link. A lot of the information here, the theory information, I must say, is not far-fetched. You read through it, it makes sense. And the other point I want to mention, a very important point, is that the intention is not for me to read through your notes page by page and put all of you off to sleep or to bore you to death. The main purpose of these lectures is to give you an overview of what's in your notes, to highlight the key points, the keywords, and also to bring in industry relevance. That's the main primary objective of these lectures. But the onus is then on you to go back and look at the notes that's posted on Moodle. Go through the notes, read through the notes, and also remember, by attending the lectures, you can see from the presentation what is important. And you can then go back to your notes and relate to this information in your notes. Okay?
Sorry, sir?
Yes.
Sorry, sir. So just to clarify, the PowerPoint is just a summary of the notes, and the notes are just more in depth look
correct.
into the topics. Okay.
Yes, you will find that the notes, sometimes the notes also have some additional information, and that's not to waste. Some of the additional information will certainly come in handy when you do register for the advanced program, the honors program. So that is why, again, I'm coming back to the lectures. When you go through the lectures and you identify what I am presenting at the lectures and then find that in your notes and relate that to your notes, you will then be able to pick up what is important for the test and the exam with regard to the theory. So again, another important point why you should be attending the lectures. So coming back then, you will find that in your notes, you do have some information on land use and travel patterns. And you can see from these few simple sketches or diagrams how your planning has changed over the years. If I had to go back many, many years, and if I took any city, whether it's Durban, PMB, Escort, Newcastle, you will find that all these cities had a single core system. That's your CBD. And all your roads linking to your CBD from the various residential areas. So the CBD was a hub. That's where the employment took place. That's where you did your shopping. Okay? But compared to current situation, now you have so many different centers, whether it's the Gateway complex, the Pavilion complex, the Brit City complex, or the Ushaka, whatever. You will find now you've moved away from the single core center system to a more multi-nuclear system. The basic difference between those two is that here you can see that your circumference are the same. So we're looking at equal attraction, whereas here you can see the circumferences are different. So we're looking at unequal attraction with the diffuse centers. Okay, so one could be maybe the Suncoast complex, the other one could be the Gateway complex, you can distinguish. So you can see how the situation has changed. The same applies to your transportation networks. Again, if you go back many, many years and still up to date, many of the cities have this grid system. So if you had to take an aerial photo of, say, Escort, you will see the typical grid system, your streets running parallel, cutting across. But over the years, yes, there have been some improvements, some changes where you could moving from a radial to a ring radial. So here in Durban now, we have the ring road, the N2 ring road. In the past, if you had to get from Durban to Pietermaritzburg, you had to pass through the city center, okay? Get into Smith Street and whatever. Or if you were in Pietermaritzburg, you had to get into Long Market Street or Church Street to get through to the next town. If you wanted to get through to, say, Escort. But that has now changed. We have ring roads that allow you to bypass the CBD. So now if you are perhaps going to PMB, you don't have to go into the CBD of PMB. Okay, you have the N3 or the N2 or the N1. I'm not referring specifically now to a particular area, whether it's Gauteng, whether it's KZN. So you can see from there how your transportation networks have changed. And these are just different forms of transportation network where you have the hexagonal, spine and delta and so forth. So you can look at your notes. There are diagrams of these in your notes. So coming on or moving on to comprehensive transportation planning. What do we mean by comprehensive transportation planning? So that is simply a study firstly of, keyword of course being the present situation, estimating the future, from the future looking at the various alternatives, evaluating the alternatives, and then based on the alternatives doing your final implementation. Okay, so those are, you can see the keywords. So and this could relate to any situation. So in the past, when transport technology had a geometric design project attached to it, then students were given a plan of an area and they were then required to choose the best alternative from point A to point B. So the group then had to look at A and B, look at the contours, look at river crossing, look at other physical features like pipelines, roads, etc., and check, maybe come up with 3, 4, 5 different alternatives and weigh each alternative. Maybe alternative 1 may be a river crossing, so there's an added cost in terms of building a bridge. Alternative 2 could be through a marshy area, so there's a problem with drainage, provision of culverts. So one could then go through each alternative and from there decide which is the best alternative. Yes, very often the best alternative relates or linked to the money basket, economic factor, but bear in mind, not always the lowest cost is the best alternative. So that's something you must also take into account. So you can see from the various steps where you are firstly looking at the present situation, and if I could also relate to a practical situation, a good few years back, the eThekwini municipality ran a project on demographics, on car ownership, population. So it was a forecasting project, and I had the privilege of being the head of that project for eThekwini municipality. And we had to then look at which sectors or areas in the eThekwini municipality are expanding, progressing. So the eThekwini municipality was split into the southern region, the central region, the the outer west region and the northern region. And from your observation, you can also see which region is expanding most. Take the central, is virtually exhausted, not much. Outer west, due to the undulating terrain, steep terrain, not much going on in the outer west. And you can see a lot of the developments taking place in the north. Cunubia, housing projects, your new airport that came up there, Juba trade port. So you can see a lot of the developments are taking up in the north zone. So one could then split the Tikwini area and then look at the employment rate, the population, the car ownership rate, and so forth in the various zones. So the same applies here, where you're looking at the present situation, you're estimating future transport patterns, okay, basing it again on your population, land use, and so forth. And then you look at the different alternatives and evaluate the alternatives, and from there come up with proposals for implementation, for financing, for scheduling, and so forth. So in summary, what is a transport plan? A transport plan, firstly, you're looking at the description of the existing conditions, existing transport conditions, existing land use conditions, you're predicting future conditions, you're looking at the alternative systems, and then the implications of the various alternatives, and finally from there basing your recommendation on the best alternative and implementing the program. Change in travel patterns with time. Now, when we talk in terms of travel patterns, what do we mean by travel patterns? And you can see a broad definition here of travel patterns. So travel patterns is defined as the number of person trips that's made between each OD. OD is origin destination. You probably came across this terminology in 2A, origin destination. Origin could be your home, destination could be campus, or home to your workplace, or home to a recreational facility. So each OD pay for each trip purpose. So what is your trip purpose? When you talk in terms of your trip purpose, so if you are going from home to campus, your trip purpose is education. If you're going to work, your trip purpose is education. By each transport mode, so by each transport mode, was it by motor car, was it by bus, minibus, taxi, rail, okay? So you can see, and these travel patterns then change mainly due to certain factors. So if you had, for example, changes in transport technology. So looking at transport technology, the changes, and if one had to go into the history of transport, you will see how it has evolved over the years. Now, if I had to go back, maybe you can answer this for me. What was the first form of transport? Anyone? First form of transport?
Walking.
Sorry? Robert?
Walking, sir.
Yes, certainly walking. So you can see from walking, we moved on to animal-drawn vehicles, horse and cart, or on horseback, down a river on a log. So compare that to now with the motor car, the invention, aircraft, ships, hovercraft, various forms of transport. So with the changes in transport technology, certainly travel patterns have changed as well. Today, so many people are catching a flight to work morning and afternoon. Wasn't there many moons years ago? Changes in wealth. The moment you have a few extra bucks in your pocket, you want to buy a motor car, isn't it? And add to the traffic congestion on the road. Okay. So we'll talk a little bit more about traffic congestion. And yes, I think some information on traffic congestion you did do in 2A as well. Factors affecting capacity. You must have done that. Prevailing traffic conditions. Rings a bell? How your traffic varies from hour to hour on the road, the peak traffic in the morning, how your peak traffic, many years ago, your peak traffic was perhaps half an hour from maybe 7:15 to 7:45. Today, your peak traffic is expanded to maybe 2 hours from maybe 6:15 in the morning to 8:15. So you can see, and the same applies to your PM peak, your afternoon peak. And then other factors that has an impact on your travel patterns, like growth, redistribution of population, redistribution of employment. Here's the moment there's an increase in population. One could link that to maybe an increase in car ownership, which will certainly then have an impact on your travel patterns. If we're looking at employment, take for example the Nandi Industrial or the River Horse Valley Industrial Complex. You all know where Nandi Drive is. New industrial hub that has come about. So certainly a redistribution of employment to that area from other areas, which certainly then impacts on your travel pattern, change in travel pattern. So one could relate this to reality, to typical situation examples. So then the planning process then is simply collection of information, identifying problems, looking at alternative solutions, evaluating the alternatives, and then selecting the preferred solution. Like I said, very often is the money basket that dictates, but not always. One has to look at all the factors. And this again could apply to any situation. I could give you a project and tell you the Warwick Avenue Triangle. You all know where the Warwick Avenue Triangle is, below campus, where the rail station is, the Birya rail station, the bus and minibus taxi terminals. So I could tell you that the intersection, I could choose one of the intersections there and say to you that there's a backlog of vehicles wanting to turn right at the intersection. And please try and investigate why there's a queue of vehicles wanting to turn right. Obviously, they can't turn right because of oncoming traffic. And that then creates a typical point for a head-on collision at that intersection, point of conflict. So you then need to go and collect some information pertaining to that intersection. Look at the past vehicles in the different approaches, right turning, look at the signalization of that intersection. So there's various information you can collect. You can sit at that intersection and do an observation, vehicle count, right? And then you can then check why perhaps there's so many vehicles now, increase in the number of vehicles that want to make the right turn. And perhaps you may have identified a new industrial area that has come about in that, so more people are now redistributed, employed in that area, which has now created a backlog, traffic jam at that intersection pertaining to right turning movement. So you could then propose alternative solutions. You could look at various alternatives. You could consider the signalized interchange or intersection in this case. So look at the traffic lights, look at the amount of green time allocated. Perhaps that traffic light did not even allow for right turning. So you need to change the signalized setting to maybe give priority, a green arrow, priority for right turning vehicles. Allow X amount of time for vehicles to turn right, stop the oncoming traffic. You travel on roads, so you've seen these arrows, right turning or whatever. So that way you can then clear the backlog at that intersection. So by simply, so this falls under traffic management techniques, where you simply readjust the traffic signal setting at that intersection and you can solve the problem. You could have maybe considered grade separation, interchange, where you then prevent conflict at that intersection by having grade separation. But then bear in mind the cost of grade separation to maybe simply doing signalized resetting at that intersection. So there's various alternatives one could think of, having a dedicated right turning lane by means of channelization, painted arrows. So there's various alternatives one could think of, and from there you can then select which is the best alternative. I mentioned the word intersection and interchange a short while ago. And my question to you is, what is the difference between an intersection and an interchange? What is the difference between an intersection and interchange? Perhaps you did this in 2A. Anyone like to have a go at it? Difference between an intersection and an interchange? Anyone? Try, take it. Yes.
Sir?
Yes. Yes, go for it.
Isn't it interchanges like grade separated intersection? One road passes over another.
Intersection is?
Interchange is when isn't it when one road passes over over another with ramps and connections?
Okay. An intersection?
Well, intersection is two roads connected.
Same
Same
level. Okay. Yes, you're 100% correct. Yes, an intersection is where roads cross at grade. The word is AT, at grade, at the same level. That's an intersection. So you got roads crossing, intersecting at the same level, at grade, whilst interchange is where roads cross grade separated, different levels. So you can see from there, when it comes to an intersection, certainly one needs to have some sort of a system to control your traffic at the intersection. They are at the same level, at grade. So it could be via a stop sign, a yield sign, traffic signal, okay? Whilst with an interchange, because your roads are crossing at different levels, at different grades, you can maintain uniformity in speed, you can maintain the capacity on the road. Now, I use the word capacity again, and I'm sure it's not a terminology that you haven't come across, capacity. So capacity is the maximum number of vehicles passing a point per hour. Normally it's per hour, per given time, per hour. So any traffic engineer's goal is to achieve maximum capacity, maximum number of vehicles passing a point per hour. So how do you do that? And you've had a look at various factors that affect capacity, like your road width, your shoulder width, potholes, geometric restrictions, sharp curves, poor sight distance. You've covered all those aspects. So it is important that one can achieve maximum capacity, but bear in mind that this is dictated by your prevailing condition, by your prevailing road conditions, by your prevailing traffic conditions. As much as ideally you would want to achieve high capacities. So ideal situation, you would love to have 3 lanes in each direction, low commercial vehicles, no heavies on the road, okay? Good sight distance, flat curves, okay? Large radius of curvature, good super elevation, but it's not always possible. So one has to look at the economic factor, one has to look at the terrain, and so forth. So urban transport planning, then general requirements for an urban transport plan. You see firstly that the plan must be adequate and must cater for future traffic, must be in sync with your blueprint, your master plan. Okay? So any plan that you come up with must be in sync with your master plan, must be compatible with environmental goals. You know, with environmental aspects is certainly a buzzword in recent times. In the past, a transportation planner could quite easily design a road and mow down 100 indigenous trees. You can't do that today. Today, every proposal has to be supplemented with an environmental impact assessment. Okay? And there's many examples to this. If you even look at your new airport, the King Shaka Airport. There was an issue there with the flight of bird path flights that interfered with your airstrip, your runaway. And a lot of was done to divert the flight path of your birds. If you look at the new Brit City complex that came about and the rail spur that linked to the new Brit City complex from Duff's Road Station, that crossed through an area that housed chameleons and other bird life. That had to be moved at a cost similar to their existing life condition. So you see, environmental impacts is certainly quite a serious issue that one needs to take into account. So, and then of course, one needs to design, or plans must be within the financial resource. It's pointless coming up with a plan and you don't have the budget to meet that. So certainly the financial resource capability is another important factor to take into account. And then finally, if you look at your notes, you will find there's some information at the end of this chapter that deals with classification of roads. And you'll see the main two categories that relates to major roads and minor roads. Your major roads being your freeways, all your major collectors, your minor roads like your local streets, your private roads, your access roads, and so forth. So you can read through a point or two on each of these class of roads, the characteristics, and that you can refer to modal. So you see why I say again why it's important then to attend these lectures, because you should have a highlighter with you, or you should have a notepad, and making notes refer to modal for characteristics of each class of road. And for that matter, all the other slides that we've been through, you should be making a quick summary of what's required of you and where you need to make reference to. Okay, so that then brings us to the end of transportation planning. So I'm going to stop this presentation and try and load module 1 of transportation systems. Transportation systems. Let me load it on from here. Okay, we should still be in full screen. Okay, so we're looking at transportation systems, and in this subject 3A, you will be dealing with the A part of transportation system. There's a B and C part as well, which you will perhaps cover in the honors program. So looking at transportation systems, you will see there's some information pertaining to policy, legislation, and so forth. And then there's information pertaining to driver and vehicle characteristics. When it comes to driver and vehicle characteristics, I could spend a whole semester only on driver and vehicle characteristics with you. All the physiological elements, the psychological elements, comes to visual acuity, vehicle characteristics in terms of design, in terms of seating, and so forth. And the calculations that go with it may be relating to side distances, stopping side distance, passing side distance, shoulder side distance, skid resistance, drag coefficient. So I could, like I said, spend a whole semester simply on driver and vehicle characteristics, but that's certainly not the intention of this course. It's more an appreciation of the various aspects, with driver and vehicle characteristics being one of them. And then looking at the different transportation systems, the technologies, comparing alternative systems, like especially when it comes to your transit systems. Transit systems is more universal terminology for public transport. So comparing maybe a light rail to a monorail, a minibus taxi to a bus and so forth. So comparing different systems. So those are some of the aspects or areas that we will be covering under transportation systems. So yeah, like I said, you can see from there that the B and C part that deals with structures and public transport, that, like I said, is information that will be covered in your honors program. So just to recap, then we went through the slide previously. Your course mark made up of 2 tests. Test 2, don't forget, assesses your graduate attribute, GA4, and sub minimum of 50% applies for test 2. Course mark makes up 40% of your final mark, and the examination makes up 60% of your final mark. So now, when it comes to the policy aspects, the information was extracted from what we call the white paper on national transport policy. Now, this white paper, when the new government had taken over after '94, the Department of Transport then invited various stakeholders from industry, from academic institutions and so forth, to give their input towards the development of this white paper on national transport policy. And I was privileged enough to represent DUT in the formulation of this document, the white paper on national transport policy. So I think if you go on to the Department of Transport, the National Department of Transport website, and key in the white paper, national transport policy, it will come up and you will see a lot of this information in there, like the vision, the goals, the objectives, and so forth. So this is, like I said, a direct link to the white paper. And again, I'm not going to labor it. You need to read through some of this information. Like, for example, what is the main vision? And you can see from the keywords like safe, providing a safe, reliable, effective, efficient, fully integrated system. And this is not only for customers, passengers, but also for goods, for freight. Something that should be economically sustainable. And you can see the buzzword again, environmentally sustainable. So you can see all the necessary keywords here. And one could then relate this to our public transport system, for example. How safe is it? How reliable is it? How effective? How efficient is it? How integrated is it? Can you move from one transport mode to another? Can you, for example, take a minibus taxi that will drop you off at a rail station? As an example. So that's where we refer to integrated system, through ticketing system, where one ticket could move you from a bus to a monorail to a ferry and so forth. And you can compare these to overseas examples as well. So we are certainly far back when it comes to fully integrated transport operations. So the broad goals of transport systems, and some of the keywords are highlighted there in yellow. You can see that firstly that the goal is to support the RDP program, to enable customers to access the transport system, to best satisfy their needs, certainly improving safety, security, reliability. You perhaps would have noticed the steady decline, for example, in rail transport over the years. There was a time when rail was running at capacity. It was difficult for you to even get a place in a coach. Compare that to today. Many of your trains are running under capacity in certain areas. And there's a number of factors for that. Safety, security certainly played a major role. There were times where it was okay for you to park your motor vehicle at the rail station parking lot and catch a train to walk. But then you come back and you find your car's gone or your sound system stolen. So you decide to use your private motor car to work and add to the traffic congestion. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is that there's a lot that needs to be done to improve safety, security, reliability, efficiency, effectiveness. As you can see in the next bullet, you miss a train. How long do you have to wait for another train? Half an hour, 45 minutes, 1 hour. So you're late for work. So in terms of accessibility, how far do you have to walk from your home to get to a rail station? Accessibility of the transportation system. Frequency of service is what I spoke about. How long do you have to wait if you miss one train to get to another train? Wait for another train. Overseas, if you are traveling, say, in the London subway, your rail system, underground rail network, you miss a rail in a matter of 5 minutes, the next coach or the next train is there. So we talk in terms of frequency of service. So there's a lot that has to be done here in South Africa to improve safety, security, efficiency, effectiveness for people to switch to public transport mode. That is one of the reasons why our roads are running at capacity. That is the point I raised. Your peak AM and PM peak has increased from half an hour to maybe 2 hours, morning and afternoon peak. So the government, National Department of Transport, is trying very hard to try and improve public transport, to try and get more commuters back to rail. Because bear in mind, rail has a very expensive infrastructure. The cost of building these rails are very expensive compared to the cost of running your trains. Very expensive. So you have these very expensive infrastructure that's underutilized. The government did invest lots of money in these transportation infrastructure. So one needs to get mileage out of it. So yes, and of course the last one, to achieve the above objectives, economically, environmentally sustainable. So there's some information on your note that deals with the policy aspects relating to government and the lower levels below national government. So in terms of the strategies, you will see the key thrust there is promotion of integration and intermodalism. I spoke about integration, where you should be able to move from one mode of transport to the other mode of transport without any problem. And they again spoke about if one has to take, for example, the rail system, certainly accessibility is an issue. Not everyone is close to a rail network or to a rail station. You may need to walk 2, 3, 4, 5 kilometers to get to the nearest rail station. So with effective integration, if you had, for example, an effective minibus taxi system that could pick you up right at your door and take you to a rail station, and you then catch a train to work, hopefully on the other side you have a rail station that's close to your work. What a pleasure that would be. So we're talking of promoting integration. There has to be more buy-in between or amongst the various public transport operators, whether it's minibus taxi, whether it's rail, whether it's bus. Intermodalism also, if you get to the airport to catch a flight, how efficient is it for you to be able to catch that flight whilst getting to the airport via the mode that you have, whether it's car, motor car, or bus or minibus taxis. So those are the two key thrust areas that we're referring to. With regard to policy principles, you will find in your notes, and you need to go and highlight this information and then go to your notes and look at this information pertaining to the role of government in transport systems. So you'll see that your national government plays quite a large role, but at the same time also delegating powers to different authorities, different bodies. So you can see with regard to intergovernmental matters, right from a national to a provincial down to a local level. And then you have different statutory bodies like Transnet, Metro Rail, airport companies, and you can see a whole lot of them listed in your notes. Okay. And then when we talk in terms of professionally managed agencies, you will see, for example, SANRAL. Anyone knows what SANRAL means? Stands for? SANRAL, anyone? Okay, so it's basically the South African National Roads Agency, and they handle a lot of the maintenance of the road network. So they are so-called a professionally managed agency that's contracted to the government. So you have similar agencies when it comes to maritime. Maritime deals with water. When it comes to aviation, your air transport. And so we have then different advisory bodies. And again, if you look at your notes, you will see the National Transport Commission, there's airport companies, the Transport Advisory Council. So there's various advisory bodies. And these provide the necessary services via various elements or factors or methods, means, could be under contract. So it could be provided under contract. So again, if you look at your notes, and I think specifically you're looking at page 8 in your notes, this section. So you can see the highest form of regulation is under contract. Like, for example, if one takes the commuter rail service, that's provided under contract. And then you could have monopolies. With monopolies, you'll find that the government is the main controller, controlling, for example, the tariffs, setting out your safety standards, the service. So all that could fall under monopoly. And then you have competing operators. And I think with competing operators, it's very important to know the safety aspect, regulation or regulating safety. Very often when you have maybe two taxi operators operating on the same route, you know the problems with that, the taxi wars that we experience. So it's very important how one goes about dealing with competing operators. And then, of course, by contract, and when it comes to contract where you form or establish a formal contract with an operator, say a bus operator, and that bus operator then will have to abide by the agreed set of rules. So again, if you go to your notes, you will see a little more information on this. And then finally, the government's long-term vision. And if one goes through the government's long-term vision, see the promotion of sustainable economic development. So at the end of the day, we all want to place South Africa in a hub of transport within the SADC, that's your South African developing countries. So we want to be the best. So in order to do that, obviously, we'll need to satisfy certain conditions. So that's the government's long-term vision to encourage passenger transport. You can see it comes up again, encourage passenger transport. We don't want to be like the Americans that thought they will solve the transportation problem by building 6-lane and 8-lane highways and byways and freeways and expressways. And in a matter of 6 months, you have systems failure. Your roads are again running at capacity due to the increase in car ownership, increase in car usage on your roads. It didn't pay much attention to improving public transport. And And we are also now in a similar boat. If you you'll be surprised. There's so many cars on the road during the day. I sometimes wonder whether people walk. They spend most of the time on the roads traveling. I'm sure they are all not special agents, reps that spend the day on the road. If you take Gauteng, the Ben Schoeman highway that leads you from Johannesburg to Pretoria, Ben Schoeman highway is commonly referred to as the Ben Schoeman parking lot. Your vehicles are more stationary than moving. That trip could take you anything up to 2 to 3 hours, depending on the morning and afternoon peak, to get from home to work and back. So you spend 50% of your time on the road. That's not good, isn't it, for the economy of the country? So you can see public transport can come to the rescue. And therefore, the Gautrain was certainly a success project. You know, the Gautrain links right from the airport to Sandton City, all the way through up to Rhodesville, that's in Pretoria. So many, even hi-fi businessmen park their vehicles at, say, maybe the Sandton station and catch the Gautrain to Pretoria. A trip on the Ben Schoeman highway could take you maybe 2 to 3 hours, whilst on the Gautrain, 32 minutes. Big difference. Okay. So the government is trying very hard to promote public transport and more specifically the rail transport. Why? Rail has its own right of way. It's separate from your road network. So it has its own dedicated right of way, can maintain speed, and more importantly, it's a high capacity mode of transport. So you do the math, take a train with 10 coaches, work out the capacity of each coach times 10, how many commuters you can travel, you can move in one train, right? And then compare that to your road network. Do a little observation, little survey. See how many vehicles on the road has just one occupant, the driver. And therefore, you will find that in some areas, in terms of traffic management techniques, they've adapted the principle HOV, high occupancy vehicle lanes. So you're only allowed to use that lane if you have more than maybe 2 or more than 3 occupants in the vehicle. Otherwise, you join the congestion on the other lanes. Okay. So you can see some of the long-term goals: seamless intermodalism from one mode to another, adequate accessibility. We spoke about the poor accessibility, especially when it came to rail network. Many people may question or argue or criticize the minibus taxi industry. But bear in mind that the minibus taxi industry has played a very important role in the public transport operation. Yes, it comes with some bad or poor baggage in terms of safety, in terms of reliability maybe. But when the rail system was failing, and the main reason for that was accessibility and frequency of service, there came about a public transport operator that gave you a door-to-door service. Minibus taxis picks you up at your door and drops you off at work. Obviously, people will then move to that mode of public transport. But there's a lot of issues pertaining to, like I said, the safety, the security, and also pertaining to the subsidy aspect. You may have heard in the news that very often the Minibus Taxi Association, they go on strike because of not getting the subsidy from the Department of Transport, like the Many of the bus services do get, the rail service gets. So there's a lot that here we need to do in South Africa to try and address those issues. When it came to safety and security, you know that the Department of Transport then tried to move away from the old minibus taxi to the new, safer system, where an amount was given to the public transport operator or the minibus taxi owner to move, to buy the new vehicle, and a certain amount was paid for the older vehicle. So you may have come across all these in the news. And now, of course, we have the BRT systems. You perhaps heard of the BRT system. Anyone knows what BRT stands for? BRT, anyone? Okay, it refers to the Bus Rapid Transit System. The very first one in South Africa was constructed in Gauteng. The Rea Vaya system, the BRT system that linked areas like Soweto to the CBD. So the BRT system, where you have these specially designed buses, has its own right of way, and very often given priority at places like intersections and so forth. So the BRT system, and it's free of the traffic congestion. So people can then move to a much more effective and efficient system. So South Africa, we have a few now. Next was Cape Town, and then KZN came about with their BRT system. And there's various routes that have been planned for the BRT system, like, for example, from the CBD to Pinetown, Gateway Complex to Pinetown. There's various routes that have been planned, proposed. So you can see then the government is trying their level best to promote public transport. So that brings us then to the end of module 1. Let's try and stop presentation. Maybe we have some time, maybe touch a little bit on module 2. The syllabus for transport technology 3A is not a long syllabus. It's not a long syllabus. You will complete the syllabus well within the time limit or time factor. But like I said, a lot of work has to be done on your own as well. So you need to then go, your main academic hub, like I said, is Moodle. So you need to go and cross-reference what I've done with you today and link it to Moodle. Let's see if I can find module 2. Hopefully it will open here. Let's see. Let's replace that. So there we have module 2 then, and this module again deals a lot with the policy aspects. So again, I'm not going to labor this and go through word for word. It's not the intention of this presentation, but to highlight again the keywords, and the onus is on you to go back and read through the information. And yes, if you have any issues, any problems, any questions, yes, feel free to bring them across. You could do it at the lecture, you could post it on Moodle, email, good enough. I think if you are registered, then you all should be linked now to Moodle, MS Team, and email. So you could expect communication from any of those sources. So there you have land passenger transport, and again the mission, very similar to the module 1 that you looked at from your white paper. Again, this is from your white paper also on national transport policy, promoting safe, reliable, effective, efficient core. So here we're looking at passenger transport, land passenger transport, and then you have various strategic objectives ranging from funding, spatial, customer-based planning to operational. And if you take each one, when we talk in terms of funding, yes, it has to be sustainable, should have dedicated funding. When we refer to spatial, reducing travel distance, promoting use of public transport, you can see it comes up again, promoting the use of public transport. When we talk in terms of customer base, yes, how accessible is the mode of transport? Affordability, and again, if you look at the white paper that I was referring to, you will see somewhere in the white paper it mentions that should not be, the cost of transport should not be more than 10% of monthly salary. That's your monthly cost of transport. Should not be more than 10%. You'll see the mention of 10% in the white paper. Safety again comes up, providing a safe transport. When it comes to planning and regulatory aspects, again, effectiveness, efficiency. Law enforcement also comes up in terms of planning and regulatory. Pointless having a system without a proper law enforcement. And one of the problems that you will find here in South Africa when it comes to law enforcement is, for example, at traffic lights, some drivers, some motorists only see a green light. They don't see a red light. Red means stop. NMT, non-motorized transport. Again, the Department of Transport has made huge funds available for projects pertaining to NMT, non-motorized transport, providing proper pedestrian paths, providing proper cycle paths where people get off their motor car and maybe get onto a skateboard and cycle and skate from A to B, or cycle or walk. So promoting healthy living as well by walking. Operational, and with operational you can see the mention of public transport integration again. So land passenger transport policy, if one looks at the land passenger transport policy, you will see again the development in support of land passenger transport, and you will find words like the planning and regulatory aspects coming in, the various bodies that are involved right from national level to local level, the different structures. You will see also the under land passenger transport policy, the mention of various types like permission, contract, concession, and one will then need to know what is the difference between permission, contract, and concession. And you can see the key word there in brackets. So if you were given the permission to operate on a particular route from A to B, permission means with no subsidy. Okay? Contract means a tendered contract price. So you tender, and depending on your tender price, not necessarily having the lowest price, very often, yes, it goes to the lowest tender. That pertains to be a contract. When we talk in terms of concession, is where an agreed price. So with the authority, an agreed price is decided, and that then the terminology for that we use is concession. So that dealt with land passenger transport, and similarly you then have land freight transport. Now freight referring to your goods and so forth, and again the issue of safety, reliability, efficiency, effectiveness again comes in to provide a provision for freight transport. Very important. If you can, you imagine now you are transporting butter from Durban to Johannesburg, and by the time the butter reaches Johannesburg, it's in liquid form. That's not the end result you wanted, isn't it? So you got to ensure that you have the proper container, proper refrigeration process in place to transport that item from A to B. So these are points that one will need to take into account. In terms of strategic objectives also, one needs to have a proper comprehensive system in place. And again, you can see the word seamless intermodal service from maybe road to air or road to water. And how often you notice these containers, for example, transported by road, sitting at the container terminal, waiting to get onto a ship. Time factor. That's why we say provision of seamless intermodal service. Now, optimization of current capacity, and that's a point I raised a short while ago, where many of our rail systems, our trains, coaches running under capacity, need to optimize the current capacity, make them more safe, efficient, effective, increase your frequency of service, work on the accessibility aspect. So these keywords are very self-explanatory, and you can go through them, read through them in your notes. Again, you can see cost factors come in, maintenance cost. Trying to promote competition, very important. When you have competition in your industry, any industry for that matter, there's a need then, there's some goal or some drive to make it more efficient, make it more effective. Otherwise, people will move to the other system or the other organization or the other business or the other product. So competition is very important. That also implies, like I said, it could apply to any situation. You compare prices of coffee at Pick n Pay and Checkers and Spar, and that's where the issue comes in. Where would you buy that product from? So competition is very important. Obviously, it's a positive spin-off for the customer. So environmental protection, I spoke about the issue of having a proper environmental impact assessment report with every tender, every project. And you can see safety aspect again, secure, reliable, optimizing your law enforcement. In some areas overseas, they're so hi-fi in terms of technology that if you are traveling on a particular highway and you exceed the speed limit, it actually comes up, gives you a warning that you're exceeding the speed limit, slow down. So like if you compare, for example, the Victorian model, the Australian Victorian model, very hi-fi, very effective. That is why you'll find that their accident rates are very low compared to us. South Africa is, I think, amongst the top 3 worst in terms of accident rates. And there was a time when the National Department of Transport made huge sums available for research in this particular area, topic in terms of safety. Okay, so land freight transport policies. Again, you can see the law enforcement aspect, equity between road and rail. Yes, this is something that has been going on. This debate has been going on for many years now, where a lot of the heavy freight was previously transported by rail. And now a lot of that has been transported by road. How often you see these huge trucks with huge containers or huge equipment on them transported by road. And remember, your road could last a lifetime if it catered for just certain class of vehicles in terms of E80s. E80s is your 80 kilonewton axle load on your road. So if your road was accommodating certain amounts of E80s within a certain class, it could last a lifetime. But the moment you bring your heavies onto your roads, high number of E80s, certainly your roads will not last, and therefore you need to maintain your roads regularly. So there's now lots of talks on this area in terms of trying to move heavies back to rail from road. We spoke about, again, the intermodal services, integration between modes. There must be proper coordination, communication between the various authorities. And this also has been a problem where, for example, the town planners don't talk to the transportation planners. As a result, you don't get the proper road network, for example, in a particular development or a new development. Local authorities don't national, so monies are then allocated for a particular area for provision of road network. The local authority thinks that the provincial authority is handling it. No one handles it, and the money goes back to treasury. Poor communities sitting waiting for the roads to be built. So you see why it's important to have proper coordination. Again, transportation of materials, all this one needs to take into account. Giving provision or allowing, opening the path for small operators, promoting small operators. So these are all covered in your land freight transport policy. So that's land transport policy, and then we come to A, civil aviation, which is then divided into domestic and international, and you can see again safety factors coming in with international, trying to focus on international organization. And you can see the mission statement there for civil aviation. And again, mention of safety, mention of international standards, providing a reliable and efficient service. So all the keywords are in this. And again, here you can refer to your note on the safety aspect, the airports, international relationships, and so forth. So I've just highlighted the keywords you do your notes on a few points on each one of those. So and then we had relating to water or sea transport. Again, with maritime trying to fulfill the RDP program, overall vision objectives, and with maritime, you can see the awareness of maritime. And recently I've noticed that the National Department of Transport has made funds available to carry out projects, to carry out research in maritime. So they're now focusing quite a lot on maritime. So economic development of maritime, safety of maritime, and trying the full potential of your maritime industry. You will see that's covered under maritime. If you go to through the policy, you will see that the policy does make reference to cargoes, financing, operation of ships. Sea is covered under the maritime. And again, you can refer to the point 2 that's mentioned. And then finally, from there, looking at the safety aspect and more road safety, again, a few years back, road safety, traffic safety was a huge priority. National Departments of Transport's list, priority list, and they made monies available again for projects in this area. And the main reason for that was due to the high accident rate in South Africa. As I said, if you go and try and download some of the stats, you will see South Africa is one of the worst countries in terms of road safety. Very high accident rate. And various initiatives were implemented by the National Department of Transport, by the provincial as well. Do you know what's the National Department of Transport's road safety initiative called? Anyone? What's the National Department of Transport road safety initiative called? No? Heard of the terminology Arrive Alive? So the Arrive Alive campaign was devised, formulated by the National Department of Transport. And they had various aspects that they looked at to try and improve road safety, traffic safety. Province also came up with their own road safety initiative. Do you know the KZN Province Road Safety Initiative? What is it called? Anyone? Came across KZN Road Safety Initiative? Heard of SAPEPE, Let Us Be Safe? That's the KZN Road Safety Initiative. So you'll see that the Department of Transport is trying to ensure that there's acceptable level of quality on your roads, and that's emphasis, of course, being on safety, strategic objective. Discipline, again, if I come back to the area of human and driver and vehicle characteristics, which I spoke about, discipline comes in there, comes under the psychological aspects, behavior of drivers, aggressiveness, drivers under the influence, fatigue, under drugs, so angry, problems on your mind, how does it impact on your driving capabilities? So all that comes, you can see the direct link. Okay? So road safety policy, like I said, certainly funding, one needs to make monies available. There's always a shortage of funds. It's always a debate for national, how much to give for transport, for education, water, so forth. So you can see there's all critical techniques, proper law enforcement methods, traffic, and you can see traffic offences, lack of respect for human aspects that I spoke about, attitude. In terms of administration system, who administering our road traffic management systems. Again, you see the various rescue services that we have in place. Engineering discipline, we have various traffic engineering disciplines in place, linking it then to trade and tool. In terms of legislation, we have thought to ensure that the road traffic laws are harmful, and they, of course, then pass down to the provincial, and then finally at a municipal level. And we come to road traffic research. Yes, a lot of the funding is by the National Department of Transport. And you do have other funding agencies also that provide funding for road traffic research. So yes, that's in a nutshell. Then that brings us to the end of module 2. So you can see we've covered transportation planning, and we've covered module 1 and 2 of transportation systems. So we've covered a fair amount of the theory aspect, but like I said, that the onus is on you to go and refer to Moodle and do a recap, a cross-tab between what I have done and what's there in your notes, so you know what to highlight. Get yourself a highlighter pen and highlight the keywords, the important points on your notes, and also perhaps for the next lecture, keep handy a writing pad, your calculators, maybe some calculation required that you can do online. So in other words, during lectures, it's nice to have some interaction. So I could pose a calculation and give you 5-10 minutes to do the calculation. And when it comes to calculations, I want to emphasize this. Please do the calculation. A lot of the calculations, the model answers, the memo are posted on Moodle. But by simply looking at the model answer, looking at the memo, you're not achieving anything. Really, you're not achieving anything. It would certainly be in your best interest to handle the problem, do the calculation on your own, get it wrong, not a problem. Then look at the solution. And I guarantee you, you will not make that mistake in the test or the examination. So please, when you're given a problem to work it out on your own, then make reference to the solution. Also, at this stage, you can make reference to tutorial, at least to tutorial 1, 2, and 3. Perhaps not all the questions have been covered in the 3 modules that I've done today, but certainly a fair amount of the questions in tutorial 1, 2, and 3 have been covered. So go through the theory questions that's covered in tutorial 1, 2, and 3. Look at them, walk through them, try and find the solution in your notes first before referring to the model answer. Like I said, most of the tutorials, the model answers are posted on Moodle. So I think we've done more than enough for the very first lecture. So before you know it, you will be writing your first test. I have given you the proposed test dates, so please diarize the test dates, test 1 and test 2. And like I said, at this stage, it will be on-campus tests, and it will be during your scheduled lecture time, so we don't clash with other tests or with other lectures. That was the reason for scheduling it during your lecture time. So do some work on your own whenever you have some free time, and we will then meet on Thursday. I know your timetable initially showed a TUT and then a lecture, which I did bring to the attention of the timetable coordinator, and he did swap it. You can't have a tutorial before a lecture, so the first period will be a lecture and then the tutorial follows. The tutorial could be given to you to do in your own time, the second period, but in the first period we will cover some work. Okay, I think I've said enough for today. Are there any burning issues, any questions, whether it's transport related, whether it's department related? If I can answer, I will certainly will. Otherwise, I will need to do some research and then give you an answer at a later stage, if it's beyond my means. Any questions?
Speaking of honors, I know there'll be urban structures and water, but what about transport?
Well, a lot of the transport information is covered under urban. So if you look at the syllabus for urban, you'll find a fair amount of transport info covered there under urban.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other questions? It's also bear in mind that with the honors program, it was not really possible to give you every option. When I say every option, every area of discipline. Because remember, the moment you add an additional discipline to the suite, it then means lecturing implications, it means staffing implications. So I think the department has looked at various options, and you may find that initially maybe only one option or two options may be offered, and then it could increase at a later stage depending, as I said, on the staffing capacity of the department. Sorry, Robert, you had something to say.
Sorry, sir. I just wanted to ask: is there no assignments or any work that needs to be handed in for this module?
Not to be handed in, but you need to now go back to Moodle and do the tutorial 1, 2, and 3, the relevant questions that have been covered in these 3 modules. So you need to go. That's your basically assignment or homework. You need to go through that and try and find the solution to it first in your notes, and then perhaps make reference to the memorandum if the memorandum is posted.
Okay.
Okay. Any other
Okay.
questions?
Thank you.
Sure.
Yes, there's a question,
Sure. Go for it.
but it's not related to the module and stuff. So, about the test one. So we haven't been allocated to our residents or our private accommodations. So what's going to happen when the time for the test comes and we are still not allocated?
Well, I'm not sure, but then where are you at present? Where are you residing at present?
Oh, Ladysmith.
So you're now currently in Ladysmith.
Yes. Until I'm allocated, then I'll be at Durban.
Okay, let's hope that the res issue is sorted out by then. You may need to make some provision. Okay, then tell me. I know I am aware that some lectures are face-to-face on campus. How are you addressing that? At least with transport, you know, you only have to worry about the assessment on campus. Lectures, yes, quite. It's obviously convenient for you since you're a distant away to attend your lectures online. But I know that there are some subjects that will be having face-to-face lectures. So you do have a challenge, and you will then need to address that as well.
Yes, so we'll address it when the lectures tell us, because right now no one has told us that we are going to be on campus.
Yeah, no, agree. But all the other subjects as well, the assessments will be face-to-face on campus. So you will then need to work out on some program that
Yeah, so
be either near campus
I just wanted
for the
to
face-to-face assessment.
would have maybe sympathy or something, because right now there's nothing I can do or the other students who are facing one and the same problem me can do, so.
Yeah, like I said, let's see what happens when you're getting closer to that date. You certainly, if there's still an issue with the res, you will have to make some alternative plan. So you will be near campus, because bear in mind that it's not only transport assessment tests that will be on campus, it's all the other exit level subjects as well where the test will be on campus. So there's some plan that you'll have to make from your side to be able to address that. Bear in mind that DUT is not a correspondence university. You all know that. It's because of the current situation that these specific plans had to be put into place, where you now have a fair amount of it maybe online. But like I said, again, that varies from subject to subject. I know there's some lecturers that have maybe commenced with online and then will go to face-to-face lectures. I know there's various at your exit level now. The onus was on the lecturer, the examiner, or subject coordinator to come up with a lecturing and assessment plan, which obviously had to be approved by the department and the office of the dean.
Sir?
Yes.
So is your initial plan that we carry on this way until it's possible to get to campus lectures, or is your plan just online?
I think for now I'm leaving it online, and perhaps it will stay online. And like I said, some of the major issues relating or factors relating to online, certainly one, I'm not sure when the vaccine situation will be fully addressed 100%, but certainly the venue issue is also quite a critical issue in terms of satisfying COVID requirements. That is the 50% venue capacity. That is quite an issue. And certainly you don't want to go against that. If found that you're packing your venue to capacity and not abiding by the 50% rule, then you can run into serious trouble for that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there's no more questions, then I shall see you on Thursday. Okay, thank you. All the best.